We'll discuss that and all of the day's news with our panel tonight. Maura Gillespie, Republican strategist and founder of BlueStack Strategies, and Janae Wardle, Democratic strategist and former senior advisor to the Harris-Walz presidential campaign. Let's bring in our panel for some first thoughts now. Maura Gillespie, Republican strategist, and Janae Wardle, Democratic strategist. Very good to see you both. Thanks for joining us for the Context USA today. Maura, I want to start with you. We've heard some analysis there that this is a very different situation, obviously, to Venezuela, Iran, a very different context. Do you see a real danger here for the U.S. administration as it considers what a possible intervention could look like?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns I have is, again, the president getting ahead of his skis, saying something that he is not prepared to back up. He said that he would have to intervene should people be killed who are protesting. And now that decision is before him. Several have died, as the reporter just shared with us. And you're also seeing that this isn't just concentrated in the cities. This is happening across the country. People in the smaller towns are simply fed up and expressing that to the regime, that they are done having a regime. And so I think it's a very interesting place for the United States to be in terms of what the president says versus what our policy is. And there seems to be a very big disconnect between the two.
Janae, what do you think of that? Do you agree?
I agree. I think the president is way over his skis. And I think that what we are hearing from this administration is quite dangerous because they've intended to potentially escalate this to a conflict. And the U.S. has its plate full with a number of different foreign conflicts. And so engaging the U.S. in something potentially that could result in retaliation from the Iranian government, as they've indicated, could potentially be very dangerous, not only for our relationship with Iran, but also destabilizing for the region. And the question remains, what is the end goal here? Is it regime change? Are there other parts of the agenda of the administration? Should they intervene and create a large-scale conflict? So there are too many unknowns for the administration where they really haven't outlined what is the plan, what is the goal, and what is the end game here.
Yeah, and Maura, do you think this is simply too many geopolitical issues or plates to keep spinning right now, given that we've got, Cuba, Greenland, et cetera, et cetera?
Certainly. But I also think that then you've got a situation where the president of the United States has promised these protesters, the people, of the country itself who are looking to the United States still for support because he promised it. And then he just doesn't do anything to help them. And we sit idly by. I think that also presents us with a problem there, too. Because, again, he has gotten himself in a situation where he promised to help and now is faced with the reality, as we're talking about, of the complexity of getting involved here because there isn't a plan, there isn't a strategy, and it's not as simple as the president, unfortunately, tends to think these things are. I'd also say that it shows a hypocrisy if you're saying that you're going to support the protesters who are frustrated with the regime. And then, here at home, we're having our own issues here where people are unhappy. And the Trump administration itself is not in any shape or form poised to be speaking on a matter where they're not honoring and recognizing free speech.
Yeah, and we're certainly going to be exploring that more through the course of the program.
Maura, I'll ask you first. You were talking about what the president can actually deliver on. How do you think he's going to be able to message this also to his MAGA base? Obviously, he talked a lot on the campaign trail about America first and a more isolationist foreign policy.
I certainly think that if those who are in his MAGA base are paying attention here, they're probably wondering, when are we getting that golden age of America that he promised? I think that there's some questions to be had there. I do see the Republican messaging, at least when it comes to Venezuela and talking about oil and talking about energy prices. That was a big focus of the off-year election cycle we just had with both New Jersey and Virginia governor races. Energy was a big focus. And so I could see an avenue where Republicans can message on oil production and resources in that capacity. I think largely, though, the foreign policy stance of the Trump administration, largely President Trump and Stephen Miller, has been one that is not consistent with American values and is going to be challenging not only to defend to the broader public, but also to his MAGA base in terms of what you just mentioned, the America First policies that they were promised.
And Maura, do you think that President Trump, his team are misjudging this, that actually come the midterms, people will be more interested in the price of a box of eggs than they are in Greenland or Cuba or Iran?
I think the Trump administration does what he does best in terms of flooding the zone and really just making sure that we are so overwhelmed by the things that are happening, we can't possibly pick one thing to focus on. And that's largely what has been successful for him, because when it comes down to it, around the election, he'll zero in on whatever is the most pertinent issue at hand. And he often, unfortunately, uses information that is misleading and doesn't tell a full picture to the American people, and especially to his voters. And so that'll be a concern for me.
Well, we'll be taking a closer look at the domestic policy issues dominating the news here in the U.S., including an investigation into the current chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. That's coming up after a short break. Stay with us here in The Context on BBC News. I want to bring in you first, Maura. What do you make of the Attorney General there saying, look, this has now become a burden for our state, for our city of Minneapolis, and we're going to sue Kristi Noem?
I think from a Republican standpoint, as a conservative, some of our core principles are smaller government. And I think what they're expressing is the big government overreach that is actually burdening their ability to keep their city safe, to keep their state safe. And I think what Republicans need to look at, too, is this the best use of resources? There were 10 agents that tackled a teenager who was working at a Target in Minneapolis. Is that the best use of resources? What you saw happen to Renee Good, is that really what's going to keep our city safe? Was that necessary in any sense of the word? I mean, aside being horrible, thinking about it from a practical standpoint of law enforcement, is that the kind of law enforcement that Republicans who voted for Trump voted for? And so I do think that this frustration is boiling over, and it's also pointing out some real issues that states are feeling when this encroachment by the federal government starts to hurt their own police and their own law enforcement agents.
Yeah, we're also seeing today that Governor Pritzker of Illinois says that his state is also suing the Department of Homeland Security over, quote, dangerous use of force. We're ending The Context USA, as we do each evening, with time for the panel, where our panellists give us the stories that have caught their attention. And Maura, your pick involves some young children and the return of the landline. Tell us more.
So I've been seeing more and more of these stories popping up, where parents are opting, obviously, not to give their children cell phones and instead encouraging them to use a landline to call their friends and schedule a play date or just to chat about the day. And I think it's such an important skill set to, one, know how to have a conversation over the phone and articulate and answer the phone. I think that those basic things that maybe some of us think is second nature isn't for younger generations. I know in my old office, we had some Gen Z staffers who said that they weren't necessarily comfortable answering the phone because they're just not used to it. And so seeing these stories heartens me and gives me some hope for the future. And I think it's a great way to stay away from the screens and to optimize some social skills that I think our young people could use.
You're so right, because, often young children, teenagers, they're more used to communicating from behind a screen rather than using the art of conversation.
It's so true. And I know with my little cousins, I'm, constantly probing them with questions, trying to get them to communicate and talk a little bit more, because I think they are just so used to Snapchatting and using text. And again, like you said, behind the screen communication. And this is a wonderful use of the landline that, just having a conversation, using the phone, remembering a number. I think a lot of us probably remember our home phone numbers growing up.
Absolutely, yes.
We all memorized. And so I think it's a good thing for these young kids to have that skill set.
Love that story. Maybe we're going to hear more about that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Context USA today. Maura Gillespie and Janae Wortel, much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you.
And